I'm Leo 32 male. For as long as I can remember, my life has been a study in straight lines and right angles. As an architectural drafter, my world is one of precision, planning, and ensuring that foundations are solid before any walls go up. I live in a modest apartment in the city, a space I've made my own but have always seen as a stepping stone to something more permanent, something I designed in my own mind 1,000 times, my first home. This dream wasn't just built on my own savings, but on a promise, a foundational pillar I thought was granite solid. My parents had promised me a significant financial gift for a down payment, a promise that shaped my financial planning for years. But I was about to learn that in my family, some promises are written in ink, while others are written in sand, easily washed away by the tide of favoritism. This is the story of how a cheerful family group text shattered my world and how a forgotten piece of paper gave me the blueprint for building it back on my own terms. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. There are two kinds of people in the world, those who are given a map and a compass and those who are told to follow the North Star. My younger brother Ethan was given the map, the compass, a satellite phone, and a fully stocked support vehicle. I was told to look up at the sky and do my best. From the moment Ethan was born, he was the sun in our family's solar system, and my parents, Carol and Robert, orbited him dutifully. He was the charming one, the risk-taker, the one with the dazzling smile who could talk his way into and out of anything. His report cards were a landscape of missed potential, but his stories about why were always masterpieces of creative fiction that had our parents chuckling. My straight A's were met with a nod and a "that's nice, Leo." I was the dependable one, the old soul, the son who never caused them a moment of worry. I got a sensible degree, built a stable career, and paid my bills on time. I didn't need their help because I was responsible, and in a strange, punishing way, my responsibility became my burden. They never had to worry about me, so they didn't. All their energy, concern, and as I would later learn, financial support was funneled toward Ethan. He bounced from one game-changing startup idea to another, each one requiring a small investment from mom and dad to get off the ground before it fizzled out. They called it supporting his entrepreneurial spirit. I called it enabling a 29-year-old who had never learned the meaning of consequence. Despite this dynamic, I loved my family, I accepted my role, and I held on to one specific promise they had made to me and me alone. When I was 28, I was ready to try and buy my first home. It was a small condo, but it was a start. My savings were solid, but in a competitive market, I was coming up short for a 20% down payment that would avoid a hefty mortgage insurance premium. Seeing my detailed spreadsheets and earnest ambition, my parents made an offer that felt like a reward for a lifetime of being the good son. They would give me $50,000 for the down payment. My father, Robert, a retired electrician who respected tangible things, said, "You've earned it, son. You've always been so careful. Let us help you lay a proper foundation." My mother, Carol, was ecstatic, already planning how she'd help me decorate. It felt for the first time like they truly saw me. The mortgage broker was thrilled but needed one thing, a formal gift letter. He explained it was a standard document required by the bank to prove the money was a genuine gift, not a loan that would affect my debt-to-income ratio. It had to state clearly that the funds came with no expectation of repayment. My parents were happy to oblige. I remember sitting at their kitchen table as they both signed the document which had been prepared by the bank. My dad even took it to his bank the next day to have it notarized, handing it back to me with a proud pat on the back. "There you go," he'd said. "Rock solid." That particular home purchase fell through. I was outbid at the last minute by an all-cash offer, a common story in my city. I was disappointed but not defeated. "Don't you worry," my mom had said, hugging me. "The right place will come along, the money will be waiting for you when it does." I carefully filed the notarized gift letter away in a folder labeled Old House Documents, a relic of a failed attempt, and went back to saving. The promise was reaffirmed countless times over the next 4 years. At birthdays, at holidays, the question was always, "Any closer to finding a house, Leo? That down payment is ready when you are." Finally, this year I found it. It wasn't a condo. It was a small 2-bedroom bungalow with a tiny yard. It needed some work, but its bones were good. It was on a quiet street, had great light, and I could see every detail of its future in my mind. It was perfect. I got my pre-approval in order, my finances lined up, and I knew that with their promised gift, I could make a strong, competitive offer. I called my parents, my voice buzzing with an excitement I rarely showed. "I found it," I said, "the one." The reaction was pure joy. "Oh, Leo, that's wonderful," my mother exclaimed. "We're so proud of you." "Attaboy, son," my dad added. "Send us the listing, we can't wait to see it." We talked for an hour about the inspection, the neighborhood, the interest rates. Not once did the money seem like an issue. The foundation felt solid, the lines were straight. The plan was, I thought, perfectly drawn. The week after I found the bungalow was a blur of optimistic activity. I had the inspection done, and it came back clean, good foundation, solid roof, no major issues. My mortgage broker updated my pre-approval and I was ready to make an offer. All I needed was to confirm the logistics of the fund transfer with my parents. I felt like I was on the final lap of a marathon, the finish line in sight. I decided to call them that Friday to finalize the details. On Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a notification from the family group chat, a digital space usually reserved for birthday wishes and blurry photos of my mom's garden. This time it was a message from Ethan. It was a photo of him, grinning from ear to ear, standing next to a gleaming, ridiculously expensive-looking new truck. It was the kind of vehicle that screamed impulse purchase. In the passenger seat, his latest girlfriend was making a peace sign, a wide, vacant smile on her face. The caption beneath the photo read, "Finally joined the Big Boy Truck Club. Couldn't have done it without the most amazing parents in the world. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for the incredibly generous gift that made this dream a reality. Blessed Nuride." My blood ran cold. I stared at the screen, the pixels of the photo seeming to mock me. It couldn't be, it was just a coincidence. Maybe he'd gotten a huge bonus. Maybe he'd won the lottery. I scrolled down, my thumb trembling slightly. Mom was the first to reply, a string of 10 red heart emojis. Then Dad, "Looks great, son, you work hard, you deserve it." Work hard? He'd been between jobs for 3 months. Deserve it? My mind refused to connect the dots, but my gut already had. The incredibly generous gift. The timing, the casual, celebratory nature of it all. It was a puzzle whose final picture was too monstrous to comprehend. I felt a knot of pure dread tighten in my stomach. I immediately excused myself from my desk at work, walking in a daze to a small, empty conference room. I needed to call them. I needed to hear their voice. My hands were shaking as I dialed my mom's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful and light. "Leo, hi honey, did you see Ethan's new truck? Isn't it something?" I couldn't bring myself to make small talk. "Mom," I said, my voice strained. "The gift, the one he's talking about in the text, how much was it?" There was a pause. For the first time, a hint of hesitation entered her voice. "Oh, honey, let's not get into numbers. It was just something we wanted to do for him, to give him a little boost." A little boost? I felt my own voice rising, a tremor of anger shaking its foundation. "Mom, that's a $70,000 truck. How big was the boost?" The silence on the other end of the line was my answer. It stretched for an eternity before she finally sighed, a sound of pure capitulation. "Leo, your brother was just having a really hard time. His confidence was low. We thought this would, well, it would help him feel better about himself." Feel better? I was practically shouting now. What about my house? What about the $50,000 you promised me, the money I was counting on for my offer next week? "Now, Leo, calm down," she said, her tone shifting from maternal to defensive. "We talked about it, and your father and I decided that Ethan's need was more immediate. You're so stable, you have a great job, you have savings, we knew you would understand." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was the same old story, the same twisted logic they had used my entire life. My stability wasn't a source of pride for them, it was an excuse to neglect me. My prudence was a resource they could tap to fund my brother's irresponsibility. "Understand," I choked out, a bitter, laugh-like sound escaping my lips. "You gave my down payment to Ethan so he could buy a toy, a truck. After 4 years of telling me that money was mine, how could I possibly understand that?" "It wasn't your money, Leo," she said, her voice turning sharp and cold. "It was our money and we have the right to do what we want with it. We thought you'd be happy for you." "Our brothers." The conversation devolved from there. She accused me of being jealous, of being selfish, of not caring about Ethan's happiness. Every word was a masterclass in gaslighting. It was my fault for being responsible. It was my fault for counting on their promise. It was my fault for not being a black hole of need like my brother. When I finally hung up the phone, my hands were clenched into fists, my knuckles white. The rage was a physical thing, a white-hot fire in my chest that made it hard to breathe. I sat in that empty conference room, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound, and felt the carefully constructed blueprint of my future tear in half. The betrayal wasn't just about the money. It was about the casual, thoughtless cruelty of it. They hadn't even had the decency to tell me. I found out from a group text, a public celebration of my demotion in the family hierarchy. I was an afterthought. My dream was collateral damage in the ongoing project of propping up their favorite son. The days following that phone call were a gray, featureless fog. The rage didn't subside. It settled deep into my bones, a cold, heavy anger that colored every waking moment. I sent a terse, one-line email to my mortgage broker and realtor, telling them I had to put the offer on hold due to a sudden change in financial circumstances. Their sympathetic replies felt like pity, which only stoked the fire of my humiliation. I ignored texts from my parents and sent Ethan's calls straight to voicemail. The thought of hearing his cheerful, clueless voice or my mother's wounded, defensive justifications was more than I could bear. The bungalow, which had been a symbol of hope and a bright future, now felt like another monument to my failure. I drove past it once at night, and the dark windows looked like hollow eyes accusing me. I had allowed myself to believe, to trust, and this was the price. The oldest lesson of my life, the one I kept having to relearn, was that I was on my own. That weekend, my apartment felt like a cage. The neat, orderly space that usually brought me comfort now felt stagnant and small. I needed to do something, anything, to feel a sense of control. I decided to purge. I went through closets, tossing out old clothes. I went through kitchen cabinets, getting rid of chipped mugs. I wanted to throw away the past to make room. Eventually, I found my way to the filing cabinet in the corner of my home office. A metal box full of old tax returns, car maintenance records, and ghosts of former selves. My hand hovered over a hanging folder labeled House Hunt 2021. This was it. The file from my first attempt to buy a home, the one that had ended in disappointment but had at the time still been filled with hope. My first instinct was to dump the entire contents into a trash bag without looking. Why keep a record of my failures? But something stopped me. A sense of obligation to the younger, more optimistic version of myself who had compiled these papers so meticulously. With a heavy sigh, I pulled the folder out and sat on the floor, sifting through its contents. There was the listing for the old condo, the inspection report, copies of my bank statements from 4 years ago. It was a time capsule of a dream deferred, and then I saw it. Tucked inside a crisp manila envelope was a single, folded sheet of heavyweight paper. As I unfolded it, the memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. It was the gift letter. It wasn't just a letter, it was a formal declaration. At the top, in bold letters, was the name of the mortgage lender. Below that, my name as the recipient and my parents' names, Carol and Robert, as the donors. The paper was thick, official. I ran my fingers over the notarized seal at the bottom, its raised edges a testament to a forgotten moment of legitimacy. My eyes scanned the text, and the words, which had been mere formalities 4 years ago, now blazed with a new and powerful significance. We, Carol and Robert last name, hereby certify that we will give a gift of $50,000 to our son Leo last name to be used for the purchase of a new property. This is a gift of cash from our savings account and there is no expectation of repayment, implied or otherwise. This gift is not contingent on any event and is irrevocable. Irrevocable. The word slammed into me. I read it again. And again, a promise made in writing on a formal document for the express purpose of securing a mortgage. A document they had not only signed but had gone out of their way to have legally notarized. This wasn't a casual, we'll help you out conversation over dinner. This was a financial instrument, this was a contract. A strange feeling began to replace the helpless rage. It was a slow, creeping tingle of something I hadn't felt in days: power. The initial shock of the betrayal had been so profound because I thought my only recourse was emotional. I thought my only Tian was to argue, to plead, to appeal to a sense of fairness that I now knew they didn't possess. I had been fighting on their turf, the messy, illogical, emotional realm of family dynamics where they held all the cards and could change the rules at will. But this document changed the game entirely. It moved the conflict from their home turf to mine, the world of black and white, of clearly defined terms and binding agreements. The world of straight lines and right angles. I stood up, the letter clutched in my hand. It felt impossibly heavy, a single sheet of paper that weighed more than all their excuses, all their gaslighting, all their dismissive justifications combined. For years they had relied on my compliance, my unwillingness to make waves. They had made a calculated risk, betting that the good son would just quietly absorb the loss and move on. They assumed I would be too hurt, too respectful, or too weak to fight back. They had miscalculated. The rage was still there, but it was no longer a blinding, chaotic fire. It was being channeled, focused, and honed into a sharp, cold point. They had given my brother a truck, but they had given me a weapon, and I was finally going to learn how to use it. The next morning, the gift letter sat on my kitchen counter like a sacred text. I had read it at least 50 times, the legalistic phrases committing themselves to my memory. Irrevocable. No expectation of repayment. These were not the words of a casual promise, they were the words of a binding commitment. But what did that actually mean? Holding a powerful document was one thing, knowing how to wield it was another entirely. My anger had cooled into a steely resolve, but I was an architectural drafter, not a lawyer. I knew I was out of my depth. There was only one person I could trust to give me a clear, unvarnished opinion. I called Maya. We had been friends since college, and while I had gone into the world of blueprints and building codes, she had navigated the far more complex world of property law. She was sharp, pragmatic, and had a finely tuned nonsense detector. When I asked if she had time for coffee to look at a weird financial document, she agreed immediately, her tone sensing the urgency in mine. We met at a small cafe near her office. I arrived first, choosing a quiet corner booth. When she walked in, she gave me a warm smile that faltered slightly when she saw my face. "Leo, you look like you've been through it," she said, sliding into the seat opposite me. "Everything okay?" "Not really," I said, my voice flat. I slid the manila envelope across the table. "I need you to look at this, and then I need you to tell me if I'm crazy." She slipped the letter out of the envelope and began to read. I watched her face intently, trying to decipher her reaction. Her expression shifted from friendly curiosity to intense professional focus. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she read the key phrases. She reread the section about the gift being irrevocable, her thumb tracing the edge of the notarized seal. She was silent for a full 2 minutes, and it was the most nerve-wracking silence of my life. Finally, she looked up at me, a low whistle escaping her lips. "Wow, Leo," she said, her voice serious. "This isn't just a letter, this is what's known as a promissory instrument. It's an explicit written promise to convey funds made to induce a third party, in this case the bank, to act, and you relied on it. This is very strong." A wave of validation washed over me. I wasn't crazy. "So it's legally binding?" I asked, needing to hear the words. "Highly likely, yes," she confirmed, tapping the paper. "They put it in writing, they defined the amount. They specified it was an irrevocable gift with no expectation of repayment. They had it notarized. They did everything humanly possible to make this look like an ironclad commitment to your mortgage lender. A court would have a very hard time looking at this and calling it a casual family promise they could just take back." I then told her the whole story, the group text, the truck, the phone call with my mom, the years of favoritism and being the responsible one. I laid it all out, the words tumbling out of me in a torrent of frustration and hurt. Maya listened patiently, her expression hardening with every detail. When I finished, she shook her head slowly. "That is infuriating, Leo. I'm so sorry. What they did was a massive betrayal on a personal level, but this document," she pushed the letter back toward me, "makes it a legal one too." "So what do I do?" I asked, feeling a surge of both hope and terror. "Do I have to sue them, my own parents?" The thought felt unnatural, a violation of some fundamental law of the universe. "That's the nuclear option," she said gently. "And we're not there yet. The first step is much simpler. We send a demand letter." She explained the process. A demand letter wasn't a lawsuit, it was a formal, professional communication that laid out the facts in a non-emotional way. It would state the existence of the promissory gift letter, reference their signed commitment, and formally request that they honor their agreement by transferring the $50,000 by a specific date. It would mention that their failure to do so would leave me with no choice but to pursue legal remedies to recover the funds and any damages incurred, such as losing the house. "The goal," Maya explained, "is to show them you are serious and that you are operating from a position of legal strength. You're not just the hurt son anymore, you're a party in a binding agreement. You're moving this out of the family living room and into the language of law." A lot of the time, a letter like this is enough to make people realize they've made a huge mistake and that ignoring it will be far more costly and embarrassing than just doing the right thing. Her logic was flawless. It was exactly the shift in perspective I needed. This wasn't about punishment or revenge, not entirely. It was about enforcement. It was about holding people accountable for the commitments they make, especially when those commitments are in writing. "I know this is hard," Maya said, her voice softening. "It's your family, but you need to ask yourself a question. Did they treat you like family when they did this? When they gave away your future home's down payment without even a phone call? When they belittled your success and used it as an excuse to ignore their promise? Family is supposed to be built on trust and respect, Leo. They broke that trust. All you're doing is asking them to respect a document they themselves signed." She was right. The knot of guilt in my stomach began to loosen, replaced by a firm resolve. My parents had made their choice. They had prioritized Ethan's fleeting happiness over my long-term security. They had made a bet that I would just take it. Now it was my turn to make a choice. And I chose to stand up for myself. "Okay," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Let's write the letter." Working with Maya to draft the demand letter was a clinical and empowering experience. She stripped away all the emotion, all the years of hurt and resentment, and distilled our argument down to the cold, hard facts. The final document was a masterpiece of polite, professional intimidation. It was addressed to both Carol and Robert. It began by referencing our recent pleasant conversations about my intention to purchase the bungalow on Elm Street. It then stated, in formalizing my mortgage offer for this property, I am acting in reliance upon the notarized gift letter you both executed on date, a copy of which is attached for your reference. It went on to quote the key phrase directly from the letter, a gift of $50,000. There is no expectation of repayment. This gift is irrevocable. The letter then politely but firmly requested the transfer of the funds into my account no later than 10 business days from their receipt of the letter to facilitate the timely closing on the property. The final paragraph was the hammer, wrapped in velvet. It read, I consider our family relationship paramount and hope to resolve this matter amicably and swiftly. However, should the funds not be transferred by the specified date, I will be left with no alternative but to seek legal remedy to enforce this binding promise, which could result in a court order and additional financial liability for any costs or damages I incur. I sincerely hope that will not be necessary. Reading it over, I felt a sense of detached calm. This was the right path. It wasn't an angry, tearful phone call. It was a business communication about a broken contract. It treated them not as parents who had hurt their son, but as signatories who had defaulted on an agreement. With the letter printed and sealed in an envelope, Maya and I moved on to the next phase, the delivery. Do not mail this, she advised firmly. Mailing it gives them time to circle the wagons to call Ethan to build up their walls of defense and denial before you even talk to them. You need to deliver it in person. You need to see their reaction and control the narrative from the start. We brainstormed the setting. Doing it at their house would put me on their turf, where I'd spent a lifetime feeling like the visitor. Doing it in public felt too dramatic. Your apartment, Maya said decisively. Invite them over, tell them you want to talk about the house. They'll assume you've come to your senses and are ready to accept their decision. They'll walk in feeling smug and in control. That's when you hand them the letter, neutral ground where you set the terms. The plan was perfect. It was calculated, precise, and it put me in the driver's seat. For the next 2 days, I rehearsed what I would say. I practiced staying calm, keeping my voice even, and not rising to any emotional bait they might throw at me. Maya coached me. Stick to the facts of the letter. Don't get pulled into old arguments about Ethan. If they say, how could you do this to us? Your answer is, I'm simply asking you to honor the agreement you signed. If they say this is about Ethan's truck, you're just jealous. Your answer is, this is about the document you signed for my home. Be a broken record. The letter is your shield. On Wednesday, I made the call. I dialed my mother's number, my heart pounding a steady, heavy rhythm against my ribs. She answered, her voice wary, Leo. Hi, Mom, I said, my tone deliberately light and neutral. Listen, I know things have been tense. I've had some time to think, and I was hoping you and Dad could come over to my place on Friday night. I want to talk about the house and figure out a path forward. There was a hopeful shift in her voice. This was exactly what she wanted to hear. She thought I was surrendering. Oh, Leo, of course, we'd love to. We want to put all this behind us. Great, I said. Does 7 o'clock work? We confirmed the time and hung up. I immediately felt a wave of nausea. I was setting a trap for my own parents, but then I looked at the envelope on my desk. I wasn't setting a trap, I was building a courtroom. I was inviting them to a negotiation where, for the first time in my entire life, I was the one holding all the evidence. The next 2 days were spent preparing. I cleaned my apartment until it was spotless. I set out 2 chairs opposite my sofa like a formal meeting. I made photocopies of the gift letter and the demand letter, creating a neat little folder for each of them. I was no longer Leo, the overlooked son. I was Leo, the plaintiff. The rage I had felt was gone, burned away, and reforged into something much harder and more durable: purpose. They had left me no choice but to handle this as a transaction, and I was about to present them with the invoice. Friday night arrived with a cold, clear sky. At 6:58 p.m., the buzzer for my apartment rang. My heart gave a single hard jolt and then settled. I was ready. I buzzed them in and opened my apartment door, waiting for them at the threshold. My parents, Carol and Robert, stepped into the hallway, their faces a carefully constructed mask of gentle concern. My mother was holding a plate of cookies, a classic peace offering. My father gave me a tentative pat on the shoulder. They were here for my capitulation, to graciously accept my apology for being difficult. Leo, honey, it's so good to see you, my mom said, bustling past me to set the cookies on the kitchen counter. These are your favorites, oatmeal raisin. Hi Mom, hi Dad, thanks for coming, I said, my voice even. I closed the door behind them, the soft click echoing in the quiet apartment. I gestured toward the two chairs I had set up. Please have a seat. They exchanged a quick, confident glance and sat down. I remained standing for a moment before taking a seat on the sofa opposite them. The coffee table between us felt like a massive, uncrossable chasm. Son, my dad began, leaning forward with his hands on his knees, adopting his man-to-man talk posture. Your mother and I are glad you called. We know you were upset and we get it, but family is family. Sometimes we have to make tough decisions for the good of everyone. We just want what's best for both our boys, my mom added, her voice soft and placating. And we knew your brother needed us right now. We hoped you'd understand that. I let them finish. I listened to their well-rehearsed excuses, the same ones from the phone call, now delivered with a tone of gentle authority. They were here to parent me, to guide me back to my proper place in the family order. When they were done, I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply leaned forward, picked up the two folders I had placed on the coffee table, and slid one in front of each of them. I also want what was agreed upon, I said calmly. I think you should read this. My dad picked up the folder with a frown, a flash of annoyance on his face. My mom opened hers with a look of pure confusion. I watched as their eyes scanned the first page, the demand letter. I saw the exact moment the words registered. My dad's folksy, paternal expression vanished, replaced by a stony glower. My mother's face went pale, her mouth falling slightly open. She looked from the paper to me and back again, as if she couldn't comprehend what she was seeing. What is this? My dad finally managed to say, his voice a low growl. He tossed the folder onto the table. Is this a joke? It's not a joke, I replied, my voice unwavering. It's a formal request for you to honor the agreement you signed. There's a copy of the original gift letter in there as well, in case you've forgotten the terms. My mother started to tremble, tears welled in her eyes. Leo, a lawyer, you got a lawyer, how could you do this to your own family, to us? This was the moment Maya had prepared me for. I refused to take the bait. This isn't about family, Mom. This is about a binding, notarized document. You made a written, irrevocable promise. I'm simply asking you to keep it. This is ridiculous, my father boomed, his face turning red. He stood up, towering over the coffee table. We are your parents. That money was a gift and we decided to give it to your brother instead. It's our right. According to the document you signed, it was an irrevocable gift to me, I countered, remaining seated and keeping my voice level. That word has a legal meaning. You gave up your right to change your mind when you signed it to help me secure a mortgage. A torrent of accusations followed. I was ungrateful, I was selfish, I was jealous of Ethan, I was trying to tear the family apart. My mother was openly sobbing now, accusing me of breaking her heart. My father was pacing, his anger radiating through the small apartment. Through it all, I was a stone wall. I repeated my core message like a mantra. This is not about my feelings, it's about the agreement. I'm not jealous, I'm asking you to honor your commitment. I don't want to fight, I want to buy my house with the funds you promised me in a legally binding letter. The confrontation reached its peak when my dad, his voice shaking with fury, pointed a finger at me. You're really going to sue your own mother and father over this? I met his gaze without flinching. I am going to take the necessary steps to enforce a legal agreement. You are the ones who are forcing the issue by breaking your promise. You have 10 business days to wire the money. If you do, this is over. If you don't, then yes, my lawyer will file the papers. The choice is yours. The finality in my voice seemed to suck the air out of the room. My dad stared at me, his blustering anger finally deflating, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. He was seeing a version of his son he didn't recognize, not the compliant, easygoing Leo, but a man who had a backbone made of steel. He looked at my mother, who was crying silently, and then back at me. Without another word, he grabbed his coat, took my mom by the arm, and they walked out of my apartment, leaving the plate of cookies and the two folders on my coffee table. The door closed and I was left in the ringing silence, my own heart hammering but my resolve unshaken. The plan had been executed. The ball was now in their court. The 10 days following the confrontation were the longest of my life. The silence from my parents was absolute and deafening. They didn't call, they didn't text. It was as if I had ceased to exist. The only communication I received was from Ethan, and it was exactly what I had expected. He called me the day after my parents' visit, his voice a furious torrent of accusations. "What is wrong with you?" he screamed into the phone. Are you trying to ruin this family? Mom and dad are devastated. You're suing them over some money after everything they do for us. They made a promise to me, Ethan, I said, my voice tired. Oh, get over it, Leo, he shot back. You're just jealous of my truck. You've always been jealous of me. You have your perfect little life and your perfect little job, and you can't stand to see me have something nice for once. I didn't bother arguing. There was no point. In his mind, he was the victim and I was the aggressor. His sense of entitlement was so deeply ingrained that he couldn't comprehend the concept of a promise made to someone else. He saw the family's resources as his birthright. After a few more minutes of his tirade, I simply said, "I'm done talking about this, Ethan," and hung up. When he immediately called back, I blocked his number. Cutting him off felt less like losing a brother and more like removing a splinter. As the deadline approached, a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. What if they called my bluff? What if they forced me to go through with the lawsuit? The thought of sitting in a courtroom opposite my own parents was sickening. Maya assured me it was unlikely, that the cost and public embarrassment of a lawsuit would far outweigh just paying the money, but the fear lingered. I started to wonder if the price of this fight was too high. On the morning of the 10th and final day, I woke up feeling a sense of dread. I had an alert set on my banking app for any large deposits. All morning, I checked my phone compulsively. Nothing. By lunchtime, I had resigned myself to the fact that I'd have to call Maya and begin the legal proceedings. My heart was heavy. I had won the moral victory, but it felt like I was about to lose everything else. Then at 2:15 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my bank. My breath caught in my throat. I opened the app, my thumb shaking slightly, and there it was. Wire transfer received, amount 50,000. There was no note in the memo line, no accompanying text message or email, just the cold digital evidence of their surrender, $50,000 sent in silence. It wasn't an apology, it was a payment, an admission of defeat. I stared at the number on the screen and I didn't feel the surge of triumphant joy I had expected. I just felt a profound, quiet relief tinged with an unshakable sadness. I had won, but I had also lost. The next steps were a blur of efficiency. I called my realtor and my mortgage broker. The offer on the bungalow was submitted and to my immense relief accepted. The closing process was smooth. The $50,000 from my parents went directly toward the down payment, exactly as intended. 3 weeks later, I stood in the empty living room of my own home, the keys feeling solid and real in my hand. The house is everything I dreamed it would be. I've spent the last few months painting the walls, fixing the minor issues, and slowly turning it into my sanctuary. It's a space built on my own terms, funded by my own hard work and my refusal to be a doormat. It is a monument to my own strength. My relationship with my family, however, is in ruins. I haven't spoken to my parents since that night. I know from an aunt that they told the rest of the family a heavily edited version of the story, one where their difficult, ungrateful son threatened them with legal action out of the blue. Some relatives look at me with pity, others with disdain. I don't try to correct the record. The people who matter will understand, and the people who don't never will. Ethan and I are completely estranged. I see his life unfold on social media, still flashy, still propped up by our parents, and I feel nothing. No anger, no jealousy, just a distant sense of pity for a man who will never learn to stand on his own 2 feet. Sometimes, late at night, sitting in the quiet of my own living room, I wonder if it was worth it. The house is mine, a solid and comforting presence, but there's a hollowness that comes with the victory. I bought my future by cashing in my past. The foundation of my home is secure, but the foundation of my family is shattered. It's a bittersweet reality, but it's a real one. And for the first time in my life, I'm living in a structure where all the lines are straight, all the angles are true, and the blueprint was one I fought for myself.